Hey guys, tonight we step into a world of mud, mystery, and manure. Because you're about to live the entire life of a medieval peasant, from your first sticky breath to your last. Imagine a one-room hut that smells like wet straw, turnip soup, and the neighbor's goat. Imagine growing up with more calluses than toys. And imagine trying to fall asleep while the wind howls through gaps in the thatch and your father snores like a broken bellows. Now, fair warning, you probably won't survive this. Statistically, you'll die before your 15th birthday. But don't worry, we're here to walk through it together, one scratchy step at a time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are born in the still chill dark of early spring, somewhere around the year 1325. The fire in the hearth is barely embers and the midwife's hands are calloused but quick. There's no doctor, of course, just her and your mother's screams. The room is dim, and the air stinks of sweat, damp wool, and sheep dung tracked in from outside. You slip into the world on a bed of straw, wrapped quickly in rags and placed close to the fire if it's winter, or kept in the crook of your mother's arm if it's warm. The midwife mutters a prayer to Saint Margaret, patron of childbirth, and dabs your forehead with holy water. You sneeze. Congratulations, you've survived your first 2 minutes. That already puts you ahead of a lot of bobbies born in this century. Your home is a timber and daub cottage with a thatched roof, shared with a pig, 4 chickens, your parents, and maybe a sibling or 2. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof where smoke drifts out and rain drips in. The floor is beaten dirt, occasionally swept, rarely clean. Your first crib, probably an old wooden box padded with lamb's wool or hay. Infancy is dangerous. 1 in 4 bobbies won't live to see their first birthday. But if you're lucky, you'll be swaddled tight, kept warm by the hearth, and fed goat's milk or mashed barley once your mother's milk runs dry. You'll teethe on a carved wooden spoon. If you're sick, they'll hang herbs over your cradle, rosemary for protection, mugwort for dreams. You won't be named until you're baptized, which usually happens within days. Death hovers too close to risk waiting. At the church, the priest mutters Latin while you wail like a foghorn. The water's cold, the candles flicker, and just like that, you're a Christian, whether you want to be or not. Historians still argue whether peasant parents felt deep attachment to their bobbies, knowing how many would die. Some say yes, they grieved deeply just as we do. Others argue they couldn't afford to. Either way, your mother sings to you in whispers. Not lullabies, really, more like chants, rhythms to soothe. A hum as she works the spinning wheel with 1 foot and nurses you with an arm crooked like a bow. Your earliest toys are not toys. They're things you're not supposed to have. A wooden spoon, a smooth stone, a chicken feather. If you're lucky, someone carves you a rattle or a cloth doll stuffed with flaxseed. No one expects you to remember these years, but the world is already shaping you. Cold, hunger, noise, smells. Everything so close. By the time you're 2 or 3, you're walking barefoot through the cottage, gnawing on a piece of black bread and trying to avoid the goat's temper. You might be helping already, carrying a tiny bucket, picking up kindling, chasing geese. You trip, fall, cry, and bounce back up, because there's no such thing as a day off. And then comes the sibling. Another baby, your rival and playmate, arrives with the same fanfare of screams and smoke. Space shrinks. Food divides, and suddenly you're no longer the baby of the house. You're a toddler with tasks. Every morning begins with the rooster's shriek, the clatter of pots, the curse of your father as he smacks his toe on the threshold. You're bundled in a rough woolen smock. Undergarments aren't a thing for toddlers, and sent outside to do whatever keeps you out of the way. Maybe you chase crows from the garden. Maybe you fetch water in a leaky bucket half your size. Maybe you just sit and chew straw until someone remembers to feed you. One quirky detail. People believe bobbies can see spirits. So if you stare too long into the fireplace or babble toward a dark corner, Someone might cross themselves and whisper that you're seeing things. Children are half in this world, half in the next, they say. Better sleep with garlic near your head, just in case. You grow up knowing 1,000 things that modern toddlers don't. How to tell good wood from wet, how to hush a chicken, how to duck when your father's in a mood. You know what hunger feels like, not starvation yet, but enough to chew a tree root for fun. You also know that the neighbors are always listening. Every shout in your home will be gossip by sunset. And always there's the rhythm of the seasons. Spring means lambs and mud. Summer means sunburn and biting flies. Autumn is apples and anxiety. Will the harvest last the winter? And winter means cramped sleeping, coughing in the dark, and the distant fear of wolves. You've never seen one, but the stories alone keep you under the blanket. You survive all this. You don't know how rare that is. By the time you're 5, you've already dodged smallpox, worms, contaminated water, fire, and a collapsing roof. You're a tiny survivor in a harsh, unforgiving world. And you've only just begun. By the time you're 6, your days begin before dawn and stretch until the stars come out, if you're still awake to see them. Childhood here doesn't come with toys or story time. It comes with splinters, scraped knees, and the smell of manure on your tunic. You're up with the rooster, literally, and no one coddles you. You throw on the same woolen shift you wore yesterday and the day before that, and it still smells faintly of smoke and onion. Breakfast. If you're lucky, there's some leftover porridge in a cracked wooden bowl. If not, it's water and a heel of bread so hard it could double as a weapon. You're old enough now to help for real, not just play help. You fetch kindling, scare birds from the barley field, and follow your mother to the stream with a bucket that's far too heavy on the way back. Your arms ache. You spill half the water. She smacks your backside with a wet cloth and tells you to try again tomorrow. Work is never-ending and you're expected to keep up. You're sent out to watch the family's single goat, your first solo job. At first, it's thrilling, freedom, fresh air. But then the goat escapes. Twice. And now you're running through a thorny hedge barefoot, chasing a beast that seems to enjoy your failure. You trip, you cry. No one comes. Because there's work to do and tears aren't currency. This is a world where your value is tied directly to your usefulness. But somehow, even on days when you feel completely useless, you still manage to matter, even if it's just by keeping the chickens out of the firewood pile. Historians still argue whether medieval peasant children were seen as miniature adults or innocent dependents. What's clear is this: you're expected to earn your keep early. By age 7, some kids are full-time shepherds. Some are sent to live with relatives in other villages. You stay here for now. Still, there are moments of joy, quick as sunbeams. You catch frogs by the stream and race them on a muddy windowsill. You find a red feather and wear it like a noble's hat. You hear a story from an old woman who claims to have seen a dragon once near the abbey walls. You believe her. Why wouldn't you? Once a week, the village gathers for Mass. You trudge behind your parents to the small stone church on the hill, stepping over puddles and cow droppings with bare feet tough as bark. Inside, it smells like incense, mildew, and beeswax. The priest chants in Latin you don't understand, and you fidget until your mother pinches your ear. You learn to sit still. You learn not to ask why the Virgin Mary is always crying in the paintings. And you learn, very quickly, that church is the one place where everyone sees you. If you misbehave, 3 neighbors will tell your father before you get home. Your education is not letters and numbers. It's observation, repetition, and survival. You learn to tie knots, stack firewood, recognize edible plants, and never, ever take more bread than you were given. There's no school unless you're extremely lucky or destined for the priesthood, which you are. Not unless something very strange happens in a future chapter. One quirky tidbit: you believe in fairies, or at least you're told to. That tree stump at the edge of the woods, that's where they dance at night. The old woman who lives alone with the black cat, maybe she's a healer, or maybe she turns into a hare when the moon is full. Either way, don't look her in the eye, just in case. You start to pick up the rhythms of adult speech. You know when your father is about to curse, even if he stops himself around you. You notice when your mother's laugh is too high-pitched, it means someone died. You begin to understand what silence means. Sometimes hunger, sometimes anger, sometimes fear. Evenings are your favorite. After the work is done, or mostly done, you sit by the fire and listen. Stories are told. Hands mend tunics. A neighbor drops in to borrow a pinch of salt and stays for 2 hours. You sneak half-asleep glances at the flicker of flame reflecting in a copper pot. You don't have a bed, just a blanket in a corner, maybe shared with a sibling. But it feels safe, familiar, yours. But this peace is fragile. One morning you wake to raised voices. A neighbor's child drowned in the stream. She was only a year older than you. She slipped on the wet rocks while fetching water. The village mourns, but life doesn't stop. It never does. You help draw water the next day, holding the bucket tighter than ever. You've learned something new, fear. You're not told the whole truth about death, just enough to make you wary of dark places. You're told to say prayers before sleeping, in case your soul slips loose in the night. Some nights, you whisper the words 5 times just to be sure. Even play has rules. You and the other village kids make games from nothing. Stone tosses, chase tag, pretend sword fights with sticks. But if you forget your chores for too long, there's a price. Play too loud during a funeral. There's a slap and a stern warning about bad spirits. One day, a traveling merchant comes through the village square. He's got dyed ribbons, cheap tin rings, and candied nuts you can't afford. But it's not the goods that amaze you, it's him. His boots, his freedom, his not being a peasant. You follow him like a duckling dreaming of roads beyond the wheat fields. But for now, you're tethered to your small corner of the world. You're still just a child, but no longer free from the weight of expectation. You've begun to understand that your life is shaped not only by what you do, but by where and to whom you were born. And there's no changing that. You're around 9 now, though no one bothers with exact birthdays, and your hands already look like they belong to someone twice your age. Blistered, scraped, permanently dusted with soil. You don't complain, not really. Complaining is for people with options, and you're a peasant child in medieval England or France or Bohemia. Doesn't really matter. The mud looks the same everywhere. What you're learning now isn't taught from books. It's passed down in muttered advice, in the slap of a hand showing you how to grip a scythe, in the nod of approval when you don't spill the milk bucket this time. Your education is entirely practical and constant. You wake up before the sun again and join your mother in grinding grain at the quernstone. It's a 2-person job, backbreaking and repetitive. Push, pull, scrape, twist. The rhythm gets into your bones. The dust clogs your nose. And the stone has its own sort of song, low and endless. One day you ask why you have to grind it every morning. Why not just do it all at once? Your mother pauses. Because rats would eat it by nightfall, she says. Ah, right. You nod, pretending you already knew. Soon you're joining your father and older brother in the fields, especially during planting or harvest. You start with easier tasks, collecting stones, scattering seeds, scaring off birds. The birds, by the way, are terrifying. Bold, shrieking sky demons that seem to know exactly how young and weak you are. One steals bread from your hand. You hate it forever. Your tools are simple: a hoe, a rake, a basket for weeds, nothing fancy. You learn not just how to use them, but how to keep them. A lost rake tooth means trouble. A broken basket handle means an extra hour weaving repairs. Historians still argue whether peasants really worked from dawn till dusk, every day. Some say feast days and bad weather gave breaks. Others point to manorial records listing brutally long work obligations. All you know is, if the work isn't done, you don't eat, so you work. And it's not just crops. There's animal care. You help slop the pigs, gather eggs, and rub ointment on a goat's infected hoof while it bleats like it's dying. The ointment, by the way, is mostly goose fat, mashed herbs, and hope, but it seems to help. You help your mother spin wool, too, sort of. You sit on the floor and try to keep the distaff upright while she works the spindle. Sometimes she sings while she spins. Sometimes she mutters about the neighbor's daughter who married above her station and thinks she's better than the rest of us. You nod, like you understand class politics. Mostly you just like the way the wool feels between your fingers. One fringe belief: that spinning is sacred. Some say the Virgin Mary spins the stars themselves, each night from silver thread. Your mother laughs at that, but still won't let you play with the spindle. The days blur together. You learn through failure. You drop eggs. You fall into a ditch. You give the cow moldy hay and get kicked in the stomach for it. Your father doesn't say much. But once, after you weed the whole garden row without being asked, he ruffles your hair like you're a dog. That's about as affectionate as things get. The year turns again. The days shorten. Rain comes harder and faster. You start helping with firewood collection. That means trekking into the edge of the forest, not deep enough to get lost, but far enough to feel the chill of something ancient watching you. There's always a sense that the woods are not empty. You're warned not to pick flowers there, not to step off the trail, not to answer if you hear your name whispered and no one's around. And absolutely, under no circumstances, should you accept food from someone whose feet don't touch the ground. Are those warnings real? Who knows, but you listen hard. Sometimes your chores lead you to other houses. You carry firewood to the reeve. You drop off a message to the blacksmith. You start to notice which houses smell of meat and fresh straw and which smell like damp wool and old cabbage. Class here is obvious. Even within your village, there are peasant families with just slightly more, and that slight difference is everything. You try to keep your mouth shut and your eyes open. You're learning the real rules now: who to avoid, who to flatter, who will share a bit of bread if you just happen to be passing by. There's no school, but this is still an education. One day you witness something that changes you. Maybe a cow gets butchered. Maybe a villager dies. Maybe a traveler collapses in the road and no one helps for fear of plague. You realize in a quiet, scary way that life is not guaranteed. That death can arrive like a gust of wind, no warning, no reason. That night you can't sleep. You stare at the smoke hole in the ceiling and listen to the coals shift. Someone snores. Someone coughs. You pull your blanket tighter and wish, without words, for things you can't name: safety, warmth, the comfort of knowing tomorrow will come. You start to find little tricks for getting through. You memorize the sound of your mother humming while she makes broth. You tuck feathers into the beams of the house for luck. You say your prayers twice instead of once. You don't believe the cow can understand you, but you still apologize when you accidentally hit it with a bucket. You're not just learning labor. You're learning to navigate a world where everything, weather, food, health, gossip, the stars, can turn against you without notice. And somehow, through it all, you keep going. The church looms over your life, not just physically, though yes, it's the only stone building for miles, but spiritually, socially, and even emotionally. You can't go a day without being reminded that God is watching, and not in a warm, cuddly, he loves you sort of way. No, this God keeps score, and he doesn't miss much. You've been baptized, you say your prayers, but now as you cross into 10 or 11 years old, the church's grip tightens. You're not a baby anymore, you're a sinner in training. You're marched to Sunday Mass every week, and more often on saints' feast days. You sit on the cold stone floor in the back with the other children, trying to keep still while Father Gerard drones on in Latin. You don't understand a word, but you catch the important bits: the devil, hellfire, obedience. You flinch when the priest slams his hand down to emphasize a point. And oh, there's confession. You kneel awkwardly behind a curtain and whisper into a dusty wooden box: "I stole a pear. I said a bad word. I didn't say my prayers before sleep." You expect lightning. Instead, the priest gives you penance. Say 5 Hail Marys, avoid pears, and for heaven's sake, obey your parents. You do your best, but it's hard to avoid sin when the list of sins includes nearly everything fun: laughing too much, pride, skipping chores to nap, sloth, imagining punching the reeve when he shouts at your father, wrath. Basically, if it feels good, it's probably a sin. Still, there's beauty in it too. The stained glass when the sun hits just right, the smell of beeswax candles and incense, the feeling of being surrounded by your whole village, breathing in unison, chanting the Lord's Prayer together. For a moment, you feel part of something bigger than mud and hunger. One mainstream fact: the medieval church calendar shaped your entire year. Fasting days, saints' days, festivals, holy weeks. You don't need a clock. The church bells ring out the time. You don't need a calendar. The priest tells you what season it is by which saint is being honored. You start to notice who's closest to the altar. The wealthier villagers, the Reeves family, and who always sits in the shadows, your people. The ones with patched clothes and sunburnt hands. The church claims all are equal before God, but pew placement says otherwise. You also begin to understand that not all saints are equal either. St. Cuthbert protects from floods. St. Apollonia helps with toothaches. And St. Sebastian, you pray to him whenever someone coughs too hard, because that's probably plague and you don't want to die just yet. Outside of Sunday, you attend feast day celebrations in the churchyard. Mystery plays are performed by the guilds, loud, colorful dramatizations of Bible stories. You love the one where Noah's wife refuses to get on the ark and hits him with a broom. Everyone laughs. You laugh hardest. Sometimes during Mass, your mind drifts. You stare at the flickering candles and wonder, what if you join the church? Not as a priest maybe, but as a monk. A monk gets food, a bed, quiet, books. You've never held a book, but they seem magical, forbidden, warm. But then you remember monks also have to be celibate, and you're pretty sure that means no kissing. You shelf the idea for now. One quirky fact: some peasants believe that certain relics, bones of saints, splinters from the true cross, could cure illness or bring luck. Your village church has a toenail from St. Ethelbert, supposedly. It's kept in a little glass case, brought out only once a year. You're not sure what it looks like, or whether St. Ethelbert had weird feet. At home, religion is everywhere. A wooden cross hangs near the hearth. Your mother makes the sign every time someone sneezes. Your father mutters prayers over the livestock during calving season. When thunder cracks the sky, your entire family drops to their knees and prays that the roof holds this time. You're beginning to see the church not just as a building, but as a power. The priest knows everything. Who's been fighting? Who hasn't tithed? Who might be harboring sinful thoughts? You start to fear him a little, not as a man, but as a messenger. You wonder what secrets he hears in the confessional. And then there's Lent. No meat, no eggs, no fun, just fish and guilt. You hate Lent, you try to love it, but mostly you're just hungry, again. Still, even with all this piety, your family clings to older beliefs. You wear a sprig of rosemary tucked behind your belt to ward off evil eyes. Your aunt whispers charms over your little brother when he's sick, half prayer, half spell. And no one questions it. God's powerful, yes. But just in case, it never hurts to ask the old spirits too. Historians still argue whether the medieval church fully erased pagan customs or just blended them in. Your life suggests the latter. The priest rails against superstition, but his own herbs come from the same field as your mother. And didn't he just bless that well last week? The church teaches that suffering is holy, that the poor are closer to God, that heaven will reward your patience. You try to believe that. You really do. But when you're ankle deep in mud, picking weeds while your stomach growls, you start to wonder, how much holier can you get? And yet, in the stillness of evening, when the bells toll across the fields and the wind carries the scent of lilac, you sometimes believe it, that there's purpose, that your life, even this hard little life, matters in some divine equation. For now, that's enough to keep you going. Puberty creeps in like a draft under the door, unwelcome, unexplained, and strangely humiliating. One day you're climbing trees and dodging geese, and the next, your voice cracks mid-sentence and you're mortified for a week. Your limbs stretch unevenly, your joints ache, and you start noticing the opposite sex in a way that feels both exciting and like a guaranteed ticket to hell. You don't get the talk. There's no whisper of biology or hormones. If you ask questions, you're told to keep your thoughts pure and your hands busy. Mostly, you figure things out by watching animals, which is equal parts informative and horrifying. Let's just say you now understand why the dogs in the village get separated with buckets of water. Your chores haven't changed, but your capacity has. You can carry heavier loads, swing a scythe, and plow without tipping the whole thing sideways. You're taller than your mother now. Your voice deepens, or if you're a girl, your hips widen and suddenly people start talking to your parents about suitable matches. The attention is strange. Some of it feels nice. Some of it makes your stomach twist, but either way it's there. You're no longer invisible in the village. That comes with risks. Because one thing is very clear, mistakes at this age follow you for life. If you're a boy and you get someone pregnant, you might be forced to marry. If you're a girl and you get pregnant, well, you might still be forced to marry, but with a whole side dish of shame and social ruin. If no one steps up, the child may become a burden on the village and your reputation, gone like bread at a feast. So you behave, or at least try to. You confess more. You bow your head when the priest talks about temptation. You try not to look too long at the miller's daughter when she walks by with her hair loose. One quirky, half-believed custom. If you sleep with a sprig of St. John's wort under your pillow, it's supposed to protect you from impure dreams. You try it. The dreams don't change, but your pillow smells like salad dressing for a week. Your first penance for impure thoughts comes after you admit, haltingly, to the priest that you sometimes feel things. He sighs as if you just confessed to stealing the moon and assigns you 3 days of prayer and no butter on your bread. You endure it. You still feel things. Meanwhile, the work keeps intensifying. Your role in the fields is now real adult labor. No more berry picking or goose chasing. You're handed a heavy, sweat-slick plow handle, and you follow your father for hours, turning earth under a hot sun. Your muscles burn, your back aches, but you learn. You learn to watch the sky for signs of rain, to listen to the soil under your feet, to judge the health of an ox by the sound of its breathing. This is knowledge passed down through calloused hands and hoarse voices, not books. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had any real downtime. Some claim feast days gave plenty of rest. Others argue most peasants were too poor to enjoy them. In your experience, feast days exist, but they don't stop your family from worrying about the weather, the crop yield, and the bailiff's temper. Still, you live for those days. Holy days when work pauses, bread is baked, music drifts from the square, and people actually smile. There's dancing, bad ale, storytelling, and roasted things on sticks. You sneak a flask of watered wine and feel very adult, until it makes you dizzy and your mother catches the scent on your breath. There's a new kind of shame in your life now. You begin to compare yourself to others. Are your hands rougher than Thomas's? Are you stronger than William? Are your clothes too patched, your hair too messy, your teeth too crooked? You'd never admit it out loud, but the comparisons gnaw at you. And then there's penance, real penance. One day you catch yourself daydreaming during Mass again. You look up to find the priest staring directly at you. He doesn't yell. He doesn't scold. He simply motions for you to stay behind. What follows is a lecture about the dangers of spiritual laziness, the sins of idleness, and how Satan enters through a distracted mind. Your punishment: scrubbing the church floor with ash and cold water while the rest of your friends play with hoops in the field. You do it quietly. You tell yourself it's just floor scrubbing, not a public flogging, and anyway, someone had to do it. At home, you're becoming more independent. Your father lets you take the oxen out alone now, just a short loop, but still, it's trust. You feel it settle in your chest, warm and proud. You return home without incident and are rewarded with a nod. That's about as emotional as he gets. But you feel it, that small recognition, that shift from child to someone who matters. Still, you're not invincible. One afternoon, you cut your hand with a scythe. Not a deep wound, but deep enough. You watch the blood drip onto the grass in panic. Your mother washes it with brine and chews you out for not wearing the proper wraps. Then she ties a strip of linen around your hand and whispers a rhyme under her breath, half prayer, half spell, just to be safe. You carry that scar for years. A reminder, even your tools can betray you. At night, you lie on your pallet, listening to the soft sounds of family sleep. Your brother's snore, your sister's soft coughing, your parents shifting in their shared blanket. You're sore, exhausted, but part of you is proud. You're no longer the youngest helper or the smallest shadow. You're beginning to take shape as a worker, as a villager, as a person others notice. You may not understand your body, or your soul, or your place in the grand, confusing plan the priest keeps yelling about. But you understand this, you're growing up. And the world is watching. The year rolls into your early teens and something odd starts to happen. Not everything is terrible. You've hit a strange middle zone in peasant life where your body is strong, your work is skilled, and for the moment, you're not sick, starving, or being yelled at. So when the feast days come, they actually feel like a break. You live for them. There are dozens of official ones, more than 50 saints' days, plus Easter, Pentecost, Christmas, and the feasts of obscure holy folks you've never heard of but will absolutely party for. And then there are the more, shall we say, locally endorsed celebrations. Like the one where everyone drinks too much, throws bread at each other, and someone ends up with a chicken on their head. No one remembers what saint it's for. No one cares. Your clothes are still rough wool, but you try to wear your cleanest tunic. Your mother ties your hair back with a ribbon dyed with onion skin, and you smell slightly less like goat than usual. You gather in the village green with your neighbors where there's music. Well, 2 fiddles and a drum, and food you didn't have to work for. Miraculous. Roast goose, honey cakes, hard cheese from the Reeves' wife. It's not a banquet by modern standards, but for you, it's the stuff of dreams. There's dancing. At first, you hover near the back, pretending not to care. But eventually, someone grabs your hand and spins you into the circle. You laugh. You trip. You forget briefly that life is mostly dirt and work. In this moment, you are dizzy, full of cider, and glad to be alive. This is also when you begin to notice courting. Not the formal kind, not yet, but the looks, the smirks, the slow dances and lingering glances. You notice your friends acting weird around certain people. You catch yourself doing the same. It's both thrilling and confusing. You've spent your whole life being told that sin lurks behind every pleasure. But now everyone seems to be blushing and giggling and sneaking off behind haystacks. One mainstream historical fact. By age 14, many peasants were considered of marriageable age, especially girls. You're still young, but no longer a child. If you're a girl, you're learning to cook full meals, manage the fire, and endure an endless parade of advice from every older woman in a 10-mile radius. If you're a boy, you're expected to haul, chop, yoke, and keep your thoughts chaste while hauling, chopping, and yoking. But it's not all hormones and holidays. There's still the daily battle with fleas. Oh, the fleas. You scratch so much your skin is a permanent map of tiny scabs. You pick them off one by one and crush them between your thumbnails like grim little firecrackers. You burn your bedding in summer, if you're lucky, and sleep outside under the stars to avoid the infestation. Doesn't work. Fleas follow. One quirky remedy. Tuck lavender or tansy into your mattress to drive them away. You try it. The fleas stay. But now your straw bed smells like a medieval apothecary, so that's nice. Hygiene is functional. You wash your hands when you remember or when your mother screeches. You might bathe a few times a year, usually in the stream. More if you're near a monastery or town bathhouse, but those cost money. And honestly, everyone smells, so who's judging? Your teeth hurt, sometimes just a dull ache, sometimes a sharp stab when you bite a pebble in the bread. Your gums bleed. You're told it's normal. You start chewing mint leaves when you can find them because the taste masks the pain. There's also this peculiar awareness growing in you, a curiosity about how things work. Why does that herb soothe a burn? Why does the bread rise differently depending on the weather? Why does your father's knee ache before it rains? You start to ask more questions. Sometimes you get answers. More often you get that's just how it is. Historians still argue whether peasants believed in a strict chain of being because of religion or simply because questioning the system was dangerous. You're beginning to see both. When you ask why the miller gets to keep more grain than you, the answer is always God wills it. Convenient. Yet even with injustice everywhere, you feel grounded. You know the names of every family in the village. You know which dog will bite, which cow kicks sideways, and where the blackberry bushes grow wild and sweet. Your world is small, but it's yours. At night, the fire crackles low, and the hearth becomes the TV of your time. Stories are told, some true, some wildly not. You hear tales of brave saints, clever foxes, and villagers long dead who supposedly still walk the roads on foggy nights. And there's always one uncle, maybe yours, maybe someone else's, who's had too much ale and swears he once wrestled the devil in a barley field. You all laugh, and someone throws a crust at him. Laughter comes easily on these nights. For once your belly's full, the work is paused, and no one's sick. You lean back against the wall, legs stretched toward the hearth, and let your eyes drift half shut. Outside, the wind blows across the fields. Inside, there's warmth, flickering light, the smell of onions and ale, and the knowledge that, at least tonight, you've earned your rest. Tomorrow the grind returns, the rake, the quernstone, the aching feet and back and knuckles. But tonight, it's just you, your people, and the simple miracle of being alive another day. You're around 15 now, and if you were born to a slightly wealthier family, you might be learning a trade by now. Apprentice to a blacksmith, a cooper, or a tanner in town. But you're a peasant, so congratulations. Your trade is survival. The idea of teenager doesn't exist here. You're not a youth. You're not figuring it out. You're just expected to be an adult now, old enough to carry full responsibility, old enough to marry, old enough to fight if it comes to that. You still feel like a kid half the time, but no one else sees you that way anymore. Especially not your parents. You're doing full-time work now, every day, sunrise to sunset. Plowing, sowing, weeding, repairing fences, hauling water, chopping firewood, rotating grazing animals, patching roofs, fixing tools. It's endless, but it's no longer a mystery. You know how to do things now. You understand the rhythm of the seasons like a second language. You know that Lent means salted fish and thin soups. That spring means mud up to your ankles and lambs in the shed. That harvest season means pure chaos, and maybe the only time your family eats well for days in a row. You know when to plant flax, when to prune apple trees, when to shut the shutters because the rain will be angry. You're assigned your own row of barley now. Not much, just a few feet of field, but it's yours. You weed it with care. You check it after every storm. And when it finally sprouts, green and twitching in the wind, you feel something like pride. That's not to say you're free, not even close. The Lord still owns your land. The manor court decides how much rent your family pays in coin or more often in labor. You might be sent to dig a drainage ditch on his estate one day or help rebuild his granary roof. You wear your best patched tunic and try not to look him in the eye. He doesn't know your name. The reeve, basically the village manager, reminds everyone when to show up and what tasks to do. He's usually one of your neighbors, but that doesn't make him kind. He's more like a grumpy school monitor with the power to make your life miserable. One mainstream historical fact: most peasants owed several days of unpaid work per week to their lord, called corvée labor. It wasn't optional. Refuse, and your family could lose their plot of land, or worse. You also owe taxes, so many taxes, a portion of your grain to the Lord, a portion of your eggs to the church, a chicken to the bailiff every spring, a death duty when someone in your family dies, and the best part, You don't even own what you're being taxed on. One fringe belief: that if you complain about taxes too loudly, the saint who protects your village will send you a lesson, usually in the form of a broken cart axle or a cow going dry. You mutter complaints anyway, softly. Marriage starts to hover over you like an approaching thundercloud. If you're a boy, your parents are eyeing eligible girls from neighboring farms, counting chickens, whispering about who has enough linen saved to start a household. If you're a girl, the pressure is worse. You might be betrothed already to someone you barely know, likely a boy whose family owns 3 sheep and half a decent plow. Romance? That's a luxury for troubadours and rich people. Your match will be chosen based on land, labor, and how many children you can theoretically produce before age 30. Spoiler, it's a lot. But maybe, just maybe, you fancy someone. Someone who looks at you the way you look at a warm loaf of bread after a fasting day. You pass each other near the well, brush hands, exchange 3 words and then blush for a week. No one says it out loud, but half the village is watching. Courtship here is a public sport. Your body is stronger than ever. You can haul a full water bucket without stopping. You split logs in 2 strikes. You carry 3 chickens at once and only get pecked twice. Your father stops correcting you when you work the plow. Your mother asks you to mend tools. You are an adult now. And yet sometimes, you still feel like that barefoot child who once chased a goat into a ditch and cried in the brambles. Especially on cold mornings. Especially when you watch someone your age get married or buried. Both feel disturbingly similar. Historians still argue whether teenage peasants felt this transition or simply accepted it without question. From your perspective, it's like being shoved into a cold stream. You can either sink or swim. But the shock, oh, the shock is real. There's a local festival soon, the Feast of St. Peter. That means music, games, ale, and most importantly, pairing off. The old women gossip and predict future couples by watching who dances with whom. You play it cool, but your heart pounds every time they walk past. You dance badly. You trip over your own feet and nearly knock over a barrel of pickled herring. You recover. You laugh. So do they. It's enough to keep you smiling through the next week of grueling field work. Back home, life is quieter, but now there's talk. Your parents discussing dowries, land leases, and whether you're ready. You pretend not to hear, but inside, you know, childhood's over. No turning back. The decision comes not with fanfare, but with the passing of bread and a muttered agreement between parents. One morning, you're eating porridge. By sunset, you're betrothed. Congratulations. You didn't exactly get a vote. If you're a girl, your future husband is likely a neighbor, someone your father has shared ale and harvest labor with. If you're a boy, your new bride comes with 2 goats and a very firm mother. Either way, it's not about love. It's about survival. A second pair of hands. A shared roof. The hope of children to carry on the work when your back gives out. You're nervous. Who wouldn't be? You barely know each other. Maybe a few awkward conversations at the well. A stolen smile during Mass. But now this is it. You'll share everything, from chores to chickens to chamber pots. The wedding comes quickly. No months of planning. No elaborate lace or towering cakes. Your best tunic, her cleanest kirtle, and a garland of flowers if the season permits. A simple church ceremony. A blessing. And done, you're married. And your new life begins in a corner of your parents' house, until one day you might get a hut of your own. The celebration is modest but heartfelt. Bread, broth, and a bit of meat if your family's pooled enough coin. Someone brings a fiddle. There's dancing on the dirt, jokes about your wedding night. You try not to die of embarrassment. You both laugh, awkward and wide-eyed. One mainstream fact. In medieval villages, most peasant marriages were local, arranged, and sealed with mutual consent before the church formalities even happened. The village community watched closely. Marriage wasn't just a personal union. It was an economic contract that affected everyone. And now that you're bound together, the real work starts. Your days double in intensity. You work your father's land while trying to build up enough stores to break off on your own. If you're a woman, your responsibilities are now officially endless. You manage food stores, bake bread, tend animals, spin wool, brew ale, and prepare for pregnancy. Because yes, pregnancy is expected. As soon as possible, children aren't optional accessories, they're the future labor force. And the odds aren't great. Many don't survive childhood. Some don't survive birth. You try to ignore that part. You do what your mother did, keep busy, pray, and hope. One fringe belief: hanging dried poppy heads above the bed is said to bring fertility. Your mother-in-law insists it works. You nod and hang them, even though you secretly think they just look like moldy onions. Soon, you're building a rhythm together. You start to understand your partner's habits, the way they hum while sorting beans, the way they curse under their breath when the fire won't light, the way their face softens when they speak of their younger sibling who died during last winter's fever. You fall asleep beside them, backs touching in the cold, blankets pulled high. It's not glamorous, but it's something real. And then it happens. Your first child arrives. If you're a woman, the experience is terrifying. There's no doctor, no sterile room, just the midwife, some neighbors, and your mother holding your hand. You scream, you bleed, and by some miracle you survive. So does the baby. If you're a man, you wait outside, packing in a panic, praying to every saint you've ever heard of, including a few made-up ones. You're told it's a boy. You cry harder than you did when your father first hit you with a shovel handle for not tying the oxen properly. That night you look down at this wriggling, pink-faced lump of future peasantry and feel something impossible to describe. Joy, fear, purpose. You're a parent now. Someone's whole world begins with you. Historians still argue whether peasant parents formed strong emotional bonds with their children, given high infant mortality rates. But you don't feel distant. You feel everything, fiercely, immediately. But life doesn't pause for sentiment. You return to work the next day. Your partner is back at the hearth within days, sore, exhausted, but determined. There's no such thing as maternity leave when the cow needs milking. Your world starts to revolve around small tasks, teaching your toddler to stay away from the fire pit, collecting mushrooms before the first frost, patching your roof with turf to keep out the rain, occasionally sneaking a moment to hold hands and smile like you didn't just spend 3 hours cleaning out a latrine pit. There's a kind of contentment here. You might not say the word happy, but you don't dread waking up, and that's enough. Then, of course, come the hardships: a poor harvest, a sick goat. Your child catches a fever and you sit by the hearth all night watching, helpless. You pray, you cry when no one's looking. They recover. This time, you mark time by the changing of your child's face, the first steps, the first words, the first time they mimic your work and accidentally dump water on their own feet. You laugh. It echoes strangely inside your chest. Still, the pressure never lets up. Rent is due. The harvest is thin. The reeve is always angry. You dodge taxes by giving extra eggs to the priest and pretending it's a gift. He doesn't complain. You start to fantasize, not about wealth, but about enough. Enough land to farm without borrowing. Enough meat to eat once a week. Enough firewood to make it through winter without burning furniture. And maybe, just maybe, enough time to sit outside after a long day, watch the stars rise, and listen to your child giggle in their sleep. It's not much, but it's yours. Years pass like footsteps across a muddy path, quiet, steady, and hard to track. You're no longer the young one. Others are. You've got lines at the corners of your eyes now, and your back doesn't quite straighten all the way after a long day in the field. But you've earned something more valuable than youth: stability. Not riches, not leisure. Those are for the reeve, the miller, the merchant in town. What you have is a reliable roof, a decent-sized garden patch, and 2 children who don't scream when they see a turnip. That's practically luxurious. Your oldest is old enough now to start helping in earnest. You hand them the same hoe your father handed you. They're slow, sloppy, and distracted by butterflies. You don't yell much, but you do watch them and something warm bubbles up inside. Is it pride, hope, relief? Maybe all three. The rhythm of the year rules your life now more than ever. Spring is frantic, plowing, planting, praying the soil isn't cursed this year. Summer brings blistering sun and never enough water. Autumn is a desperate rush to gather, dry, store. And winter is bleak. You still work, of course, there's always something, but winter's quiet. The world narrows to firelight and cold floors. The wind moans like it's remembering something terrible. Your children huddle near you. You tell them stories. Some true, some invented, some your mother told you in the same creaky voice. One mainstream historical fact. Peasant households often shared one main room with animals brought in during winter for warmth. And yes, it smells like it sounds. Your goat snores. Your child snores. You do too, your partner tells you so nightly. You're better at things now. You can look at the sky and tell if rain coming. You can cure ham without wasting a single scrap. You've even started learning basic reckoning, enough numbers to track your debts and count sacks of grain. Not bad for someone who never learned to read. Still, life is fragile. One bad year, one injury, one corrupt reeve, and you could lose everything. You see it happen. A friend, Martin, breaks his leg when a cartwheel collapses. No one can spare time to help him plow. His crops fail. His children cry from hunger. His wife leaves for her brother's farm. He begs the manor for mercy. He gets evicted instead. You share a bit of your grain. It's not enough. It never is. And you realize this thing you've built, it floats. Not on a foundation of stone, but on mud, always shifting, always one mistake from sinking. Your partner worries about sickness. There's been talk of fever downriver. The priest holds longer masses, more incense, more muttering in Latin. Your children are told not to drink from the communal cup. One fringe belief: people hang sprigs of rosemary and garlic over their doors to ward off disease. Some smear their thresholds with chicken blood. Others swear by burnt sage. You do all of it. Can't hurt. Then one morning you wake up to find the village blacksmith has died in his sleep. No warning, no wounds, just gone. You kneel and pray, but your heart pounds like hooves in the dark. Death, once distant, now feels like a shadow you can't shake. Historians still argue whether peasants were more resigned to death or just better at pretending not to be afraid. You're terrified, but you keep going anyway. Because life doesn't stop. Your animals need care. Your fields need weeding. Your roof leaks again. Your youngest has worms. Your partner accidentally burns the pottage. You accidentally insult the Reeves' wife, long story, involving a comment about onions. But even through the chaos, you begin to appreciate small victories. You fix that leaky roof using old wagon boards and dried moss. You barter for a stronger ox. You finally catch that rat that's been raiding your pantry for weeks. Your child makes it through a winter without coughing up blood. Your partner smiles, really smiles, when you surprise them with a bit of cheese on a fasting day. And miracle of miracles, you find yourself laughing more often than crying. Your body reminds you it's aging. Knees creak, teeth ache. You squint more in low light, and there's a strange, unsettling groan every time you stand up from your own spine. Lovely. But you endure because you know how to pace yourself now, when to push, when to pause, when to wrap your wrist in linen soaked in vinegar and say, it'll pass. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Your children grow, they argue, they break things, they ask questions you can't answer. You don't remember being this mouthy at their age. You probably were. You watch them, these odd little copies of yourself, and realize that one day soon they'll be you. They'll sweat in the same fields, curse the same stubborn goats, watch their own children grow and wonder when their knees started hurting. And that's okay. Because despite everything, you've kept them alive. And that might be the closest thing to a miracle your life will ever know. The first gray hair doesn't surprise you. It's the second one on your chin, curled like a wise old worm, that really gets your attention. You stare at it in the reflection of the water bucket, squint, then pluck it. It grows back. You're aging. Not dramatically, not like a falling oak, but like a worn boot, softening, cracking, gradually losing its grip on the path. And everyone sees it. People stop calling you young one. They start asking for your opinion, your advice. Even the reeve grunts a kind of respect when he passes. Your children are half-grown now, gangly and moody and perpetually hungry. You remember being that age, testing limits, eyeing the world like it was a loaf of bread too far out of reach. Now you're the limit they test. You yell sometimes. Other times, you just shake your head and let them figure it out the hard way. And they do. Your eldest learns how to yoke the oxen without tipping the plow. Your youngest learns how to light a fire even when the wood's damp. You stand back and let them learn. You try not to hover. You mostly fail. Marriage talk starts circling again. This time for your children. It's strange, isn't it? You feel like you just got married. And now you're listening to your daughter giggle behind her hand while your partner mutters about dowries and respectable families. One mainstream fact. Most peasant children who survived into their teens were expected to marry by their early 20s at the latest. Extended bachelorhood wasn't common. It was too costly, too inconvenient, and frankly, too suspicious. You start preparing. You set aside cheese, coins, linen. You help thatch a roof in exchange for a piglet. Your partner sews extra tunics from worn wool. Bit by bit, you assemble a dowry, not flashy but solid, like everything you've done in life. And then suddenly your child is gone, moved into another hut, another household. Not far, just across the field, but your home feels bigger, quieter, too quiet sometimes. That's the thing no one tells you about getting older in a medieval village. You don't retire. There's no golden handshake, no quiet mornings with tea and crossword puzzles. You just do less, slower, more carefully. You still work the fields, but your children now take the lead. You offer tips, supervise, complain about their technique. They roll their eyes. You try not to take it personally. You're becoming that parent. One quirky bit of village lore. It's said that if your chickens start laying smaller eggs, someone in your family is losing strength. You don't believe it until your hens lay tiny eggs, and you can't quite lift the grain sack like you used to. Winter hits harder now. Your joints ache so badly you sit by the fire half the day, rubbing your knees and mumbling oaths you're not supposed to say near the priest. You try a poultice of mustard seed and vinegar. It works about as well as prayer, which is to say, not at all. Historians still argue whether elderly peasants were respected or simply tolerated. In your case, a bit of both. Your children love you. They also wish you stop telling the same story about how you once killed a snake with a shovel. You do tell it a lot because it was impressive. But in the quiet hours, after the goats are settled, after the hearth has dimmed, you notice time moving faster. Seasons blur. Names change. The baby you helped deliver 5 years ago is now chasing geese with a stick and shouting rude things about the priest's beard. You go to more funerals than weddings now. Old neighbors, childhood friends, your cousin who always cheated at dice, the midwife who brought all your children into the world. Each loss is a thread pulled from your life's tapestry. The fabric holds, but you feel the thinning. And yet there's peace in this stage of life. You're no longer desperate. You don't panic when the rain lasts too long or the barley grows slow. You've seen bad years and come through the other side. Your experience is its own kind of wealth. Sometimes your grandchildren visit. You pretend to scowl when they touch your tools or chase the chickens. But inside, your heart glows like coals under a pot. You sneak them bits of cheese. Tell them slightly exaggerated stories. Maybe the snake was actually 2 snakes. And one evening, after a particularly warm summer day, you sit outside your home and just exist. The sky is streaked with pink. The fields hum with crickets. Your partner dozes beside you. Your children laugh from inside. And for a rare moment, you feel utterly, completely content. You're not rich, you're not famous, but you've raised a family, built a home, fed a village, survived plagues, storms, and teenage children. You did what you were born to do. And for a medieval peasant, that's everything. Old age doesn't knock politely. It barges in with creaky knees, missing teeth, and a stubborn cough that never quite goes away. You wake up slower, work shorter days, sit by the fire more. Sometimes you forget what day it is, or why you came outside holding a turnip. But you're still here. You've outlived most of your childhood friends. Many died in their 30s or 40s, some from accidents, others from infection, childbirth, or bad winters. You're past 50 now, which is practically wizard status in the village. People start calling you old so-and-so, as if you've become part of the scenery. You're no longer expected to work the hardest, but you still rise with the sun. You like the routine. You tend the chickens, mend nets, patch roof thatch from a stool. Your hands are knotted like gnarled roots, but they still remember how to twist cord or tie bundles of herbs with your eyes closed. Sometimes younger villagers ask for your advice: how to heal cracked hooves, how to preserve onions through a wet spring, how to calm a fever with elderflower. You give what you can. Sometimes they even listen. One mainstream fact: medieval peasants didn't often live into what we now call old age. But when they did, they were usually seen as holders of communal knowledge, living libraries of seasons past and lessons learned. You've earned that place. It feels strange. You remember being the loudest voice at feast days, the fastest with the scythe, the last to leave the ale bench. Now you sip slowly, speak softly, and laugh at the rowdy ones without needing to join in. Sometimes they beg you to sing the old songs. You do. Your voice cracks, but they cheer anyway. Your children visit often, bringing grandkids who shout and stomp and get mud on everything. You pretend to scold them, then slip them apples when no one's looking. You become the soft landing in their hard little world, a warm lap, a good story, a knowing wink. You tell them about your childhood goat. Remember her, the one that headbutted the priest's laundry and caused a scandal. They laugh. You laugh. You've told the story 100 times, but it still works. That's the magic of memory. It becomes a kind of glue, holding generations together. Still, there are hard days. You lose your spouse's sibling. Then, a season later, your spouse. The grief is deep, not loud or dramatic, just a heavy blanket that won't quite lift. You sleep poorly for weeks. Your food tastes dull. The hut feels bigger and colder without their breath beside yours. But you go on, because that's what people like you do. You find comfort in habits, stirring pottage just the way they liked it, saying their favorite prayer at night, wearing their old tunic to fetch water. It's a bit ragged, but so are you. One fringe belief: placing a stone from your loved one's favorite path beneath your pillow helps you dream of them. You try it. Whether it works or not, you wake feeling a little less hollow. That's enough. You start noticing the small kindnesses more. The way your daughter's son brings in wood without being asked. The way the neighbor girl sings to her sheep while they graze. The way someone patched your garden fence without a word. Historians still argue whether old peasants truly retired or simply faded into less strenuous tasks. But you know the truth. You don't stop living until your last chore is done, and you've still got things to do. You carve simple toys, fix broken buckets, teach your granddaughter to recognize edible mushrooms, not the ones that made your cousin hallucinate for 3 days. You give her the good walking stick when her knee starts acting up. She beams like you gave her a crown. And then one day, you're invited to speak at the winter feast, not to sing or joke, but to remember. To tell the young ones what it was like back then. You clear your throat, raise your mug, and begin. You speak of droughts and floods, of hard years and holy days, of dancing with bare feet and muddy skirts. You speak of the year the pigs got loose and invaded the manor's herb garden. You speak of grief, of joy, of survival. When you finish, there's a quiet pause and then applause. Not thunderous, just warm, familiar, respectful. You're not invisible anymore. You're a story. That night you sit beside the hearth, staring into the coals. Your joints throb, your eyes blur, but your heart is still steady. You've lived fully. You've done the work. And whatever time is left, you plan to spend it slowly, gratefully, tending the garden, hugging your grandchildren, sitting in the sun with a bit of bread and honey, and not a single task demanding your hands. The world can go on spinning. You've earned your rest. You wake each morning a little slower now. Sometimes your bones crack like dry twigs just from standing. You chuckle at it, half amusement, half resignation. Your days are quieter, lighter, stitched together with habits rather than obligations. You don't have to do much anymore, but still, you do what you can. You sweep the hearth, feed the hens, sit in the sun and shell beans. You hum to yourself not because you mean to, but because the silence feels a bit too large otherwise. Your world, once bustling with children, chores, and clamor, has shrunk. But in that smaller space, there's clarity. Your hair's almost entirely gray now, the strands wiry and stubborn. Your face is a map, lines carved by laughter, grief, wind, and time. Your hands are knotted but steady. When you smile, it's slow, genuine, like bread rising by firelight. Your children run their own households now. They come by often, always with a bit of bread, a newsy update, or a grumpy toddler who doesn't want to wear their shoes. You listen, nod, advise when asked. You've learned not to meddle, mostly. The village itself has changed too. New faces, old buildings repaired or abandoned. The carpenter's son runs the shop now. The field where you once chased geese has been turned into grazing space. You walk past it, chuckling at the memory of slipping face first into a dung pile. You never quite got the smell out of those boots. One mainstream fact: medieval villages were remarkably stable but never static. Newcomers would arrive, sometimes wanderers, sometimes second sons with nowhere else to go. And over time, the balance of power and routine shifted, bit by bit. You notice those shifts more now. You're one of the last from your generation. The last to remember when the famine hit hard 20 years ago. The last to remember the fire that nearly took the mill. The last to remember the old priest who could quote scripture and drink anyone under the table. You are memory made flesh. One fringe belief: that the very old can bless the land with their touch. You've been asked to walk the fields before sowing, to murmur a prayer while dropping a handful of seed. Not because it works necessarily, but because people want it to. And so you do. You walk slowly, staff in hand, whispering as you go. Old words, some sacred, some just habit. You don't know if the grain grows taller because of you, but it does grow. You've started talking to yourself more. You don't mind. Sometimes you're the best company. You laugh at your own jokes, finish your own sentences, tell yourself the same story 3 times, forgetting you already told it. It's oddly comforting. Sometimes memories flood in without warning. You'll be stirring a pot of lentils and suddenly it's your wedding day again. Your partner brushing flour from their cheek, their nervous grin, the smell of sheep wool and rosemary in the air. You pause. Let the image hold, then stir again. You still attend mass when your knees allow. You sit near the back, wrapped in wool, half listening, half dozing. The candles flicker. The incense stings your eyes. The Latin washes over you like river water, strange and familiar all at once. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants found spiritual comfort in their faith or simply feared the consequences of falling out of line. It's both. You pray not just for salvation, but for rain, for strength, for your grandchildren's teeth to grow in straight. You've outlived expectations. Many would have called your life complete already. But you keep going, step by slow step, partly because you can, partly because there's still more to see. And there is still beauty, even now. The way the sun warms your ankles through the cottage window, the taste of warm broth with extra salt, the feel of your grandchild's small hand tucked into your worn palm, the music of frogs croaking after a rain. Simple things, but they're yours. You've stopped measuring days in tasks completed. Now they're measured in moments remembered. A good joke, a shared meal, a dream you can actually recall. One morning you wake to find frost glazing the earth in delicate lace. You watch your breath puff in the cold. You light the fire with practiced hands, sit back, and sip warm cider. The world outside still spins, faster than it used to. The young folk rush through chores. The manor shuffles through new stewards. The price of grain changes. You observe but rarely intervene. That's not your role anymore. You are the oak in the center of the field, weathered, cracked, still standing. And some days, that's more than enough. Winter comes harder this year, not with storm or fury, but with a long, creeping stillness. The kind that seeps into the bones, no matter how many layers of wool you wrap around yourself. The wind whistles through chinks in the shutters like it's humming a tune only old bones can hear. Your joints ache with each cold dawn. You spend more time near the hearth, watching the flames rise and fall like breathing. It comforts you, fire always has. You think of how many winters you've survived in this very hut, how many feet have paced across this uneven floor, how many memories cling to the walls like smoke. You're no longer expected to do much, and in a strange way, that feels heavier than any chore. The stillness is unsettling. You start finding tasks for yourself, sorting dried herbs, polishing spoons, straightening the kindling stack that definitely doesn't need straightening. Anything to stay useful. One morning, your eldest grandchild insists on chopping the firewood for you. You pretend to argue, muttering something about the old way being the right way, but you're secretly relieved. You sit on the stool and supervise, giving terrible advice like, "Try yelling at the log first. It's more obedient that way." They roll their eyes, but they smile. One mainstream fact: elders in medieval villages often lived with their extended families, contributing to domestic tasks or childcare if they were able. In return, they were cared for, fed, and housed, a form of unspoken social contract. Your part of the bargain is the stories. You tell them generously. Tales of saints and spirits, of harvests gone wrong and wild feasts gone right, of the time your neighbor tried to ride a goat like a horse and nearly broke his pride, of your partner, who once got so flustered during a festival dance that they fell into a pig trough. Your grandchildren listen, eyes wide, mouths stuffed with bread. You watch their faces, trying to memorize them the way they'll one day try to remember yours. And then the cough begins. Small at first, a dry tickle you brush off with tea and stubbornness, but it grows deeper, longer. You wheeze when you climb into bed. The cold in your chest settles like a lodger who has no plans of leaving. One fringe belief: sleep with a sprig of thyme beneath your pillow to ward off death. You do it, not because you think it'll work, but because you always liked the smell of thyme. The priest visits. He speaks softly, offers prayers. You nod, not quite ready to say goodbye, but not afraid either. He reminds you that your soul is safe. You remind him to stop putting so much garlic in the lentil soup at the feast. You both laugh. Historians still argue whether peasants feared death more than they feared hunger or sin. You don't fear it. You just don't want it arriving today. There are still things to see, smells to savor, jokes to tell. But your body is telling you something different. The walk to the well is now impossible. Your legs tremble after standing. You sleep more, eat less. You start giving things away: your good wooden comb, your partner's patched apron, the clay cup you've used for years. You don't announce it. You just leave them in the right hands. And then one evening, as frost paints the window and the fire cracks low, you feel a deep, warm stillness in your chest. Not pain, not fear, just stillness. You call your children close. You say their names slow and clear. You hold their hands, tell them they were the best thing you ever did. You give them one last bit of advice. Always stir the porridge clockwise, it keeps the devil guessing. They laugh, they cry, so do you. You look at their faces, the ones you raised, the ones who will raise others, and you see the future. You feel it settle in your bones, not as loss but as a kind of passing torch. You lie back, close your eyes, and listen. You hear the wind outside, the fire inside, your own breath softer now, like the rustling of linen on skin. Then just warmth and peace. They say the dead don't care what happens after they're gone, but that's not quite true, because even though you're not here anymore in the way you once were, your presence lingers like the scent of bread long after the loaf is gone. You're remembered. Your children mourn quietly. There's no dramatic wailing, no tossing of ashes into the wind, just silence and work, because the chickens still need feeding, the goats still need milking. Grief in the village walks hand in hand with duty. They bury you near the chapel, not because the priest insisted, but because your children did. They chose a good spot, too, beneath that crooked elm tree you always liked, the one that hums with bees in summer and drops its leaves like a shrug in autumn. You'd be pleased. One mainstream fact: Christian burial was nearly universal in medieval Europe. Peasants were typically interred in consecrated ground with a simple shroud and little fanfare. Headstones were rare. Most were marked by memory. Your grave has no stone, but people remember. They remember the way you danced with one boot and one bare foot when you lost a bet. The way you brewed nettle beer just strong enough to make the reeve hiccup in Latin. The way you once fed your last egg to a stray dog because it looked cold. Your grandchildren place flowers on your grave, wild ones, half crushed in their sticky hands. One of them whispers a goodbye in your old dialect. Another just leaves their favorite pebble. That's enough. That's everything. Your hut stands quiet for a while. Dusk gathers. The fire pit stays cold. But then months later, someone moves in, a cousin's cousin with a cartload of hope and a nervous donkey. They sweep the hearth, patch the roof, hang herbs from the rafters. And just like that, the wheel turns again. Your old walking stick becomes a garden post. Your comb, passed down, ends up in the pocket of a granddaughter who braids her hair like you did, tight and fast, with a single stubborn curl left loose on purpose. The village still tells your stories. They get funnier, wilder, softer with time. Now apparently you once wrestled a fox and won. You didn't. You just scared it with a turnip, but you'd like the new version better. One fringe belief: that the spirits of good ancestors protect the village from misfortune. They say your laugh echoes in the rafters during storms and your old stool never burns, no matter how many times it's tossed on the fire pole. Coincidence? Maybe, but comforting. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly believed in ghosts or simply used them to explain the unexplainable. Well, maybe you knock over a clay cup now and then, just to keep them on their toes. Your name becomes a shorthand for survival. She got through the frost of 78. He built his tools like her. When things go bad, remember how they managed. You are a thread in the fabric of this place. Not the boldest color, not the strongest weave, but essential. The cycle continues. Another baby is born in the village, swaddled in old linen and placed by the fire where your youngest once napped. Another wedding takes place in the chapel where you exchanged nervous glances over candlelight. Another harvest is gathered. Another storm endured. The village endures. Because of you. And even as the years pass, and the children of children forget the sound of your voice or the way your stew always needed more salt, the soil remembers your footsteps. The wind carries your breath. The hearthstones still hold your warmth. You lived. You mattered. And that's more than most people ever dare to hope. Generations pass like candle flames, flickering, fading, reigniting in new hands. And now the world you once knew looks different. The trees stand taller. The village paths wind a little further. Even the chapel has a new roof. But your story, your life, still hums beneath it all. Your great-grandchildren don't remember your voice, not exactly, but they mimic your sayings, your jokes, the way you used to flick flour at people who annoyed you. Your name comes up at feasts, in quiet conversations, and in the small decisions people make without knowing why. One day, a child asks, "Who was she?" while tracing a finger through the soft dirt at the base of that crooked elm tree. The answer comes like a lullaby. She was one of us, a good one. And just like that, you're alive again for a moment in the mind of someone new. The house you built is now part of someone else's life. The beams groan the same way in the wind. The fire pit still hosts stories and suppers. A child carves their name into the same windowsill you once leaned on during long, quiet afternoons. You've become part of the land. One mainstream fact: medieval peasants rarely left written records. Their lives were recorded in land rolls, tithes, or manorial court entries, but mostly they were remembered orally, through stories, habits, recipes, songs. Your life is woven into the daily fabric, not with grand monuments but with practical echoes. The way your family plants onions in rows instead of mounds, the pattern used to mend tunics, the special way the bread is sliced at the winter feast, always from the middle first as you preferred. One fringe belief lingers among the children, that if they visit your tree and whisper a wish, you'll send a breeze in reply. Sometimes it works, or so they say. Historians still argue whether peasants understood legacy the way nobles did, whether they thought of themselves as part of history. But you didn't need to be carved in stone. You were carved in life. Your grandchildren grow old. Their hands echo your movements, tightening a strap, patting a shoulder, stirring the soup with a soft hum. The rhythm continues. And one day, long from now, someone curious will walk past that tree. A traveler, maybe, or a scholar from a distant city. They'll ask who lies there beneath the roots. And someone will answer, "That was a woman who lived a good life, worked hard, raised children, told bad jokes, never wasted stew." And that's enough. Because it was never about fame or fortune, not for you. It was about keeping people fed, warm, alive. It was about surviving the storm and making it to spring. It was about being there. So now, as this long tale winds to its close and the fire of your story dims to a glow, rest in the quiet knowledge that you mattered, deeply, enduringly. Even now, someone, somewhere, is living a little better because you once lived it all. And now, listener, take a deep breath. You've walked the entire road, a whole life, from the first cry in a straw-stuffed cradle to the final breath under a crooked tree. You've trudged through mud, shared a wedding feast, cradled a newborn by the hearth. You've endured famine, danced in the spring, and laughed with sore muscles after a long day's work. And somehow here you are, still warm, still breathing, still you. Maybe you're curled under a blanket right now, or stretched out with one arm behind your head, listening to the soft hum of your room. Maybe a fan whirs nearby, or the wind outside your window sounds a little like distant voices. Let it all slow down now. Let the flickering torchlight of that medieval world fade into the quiet. There are no more turnips to harvest, no more reeves to avoid, no more aching joints or tricky thatch repairs, just calm. You've seen the full arc of a life that was never easy, but always real. And maybe, just maybe, you see a piece of yourself in it, a quiet kind of strength, a will to endure, a heartbeat that keeps its own gentle rhythm. So close your eyes now. Let the earth hold you. Let the past fall softly behind you like autumn leaves. Tomorrow will come, but tonight you rest. Sweet dreams.